It's almost 7:16 on a Monday morning. I want to welcome to the studio Tad Rogers, pastor First Baptist Church, and Alan Arms is here. He's on mic 4. And I tell you what, I got to compliment you on yesterday's sermon. That's the main reason I brought you here to, like in the prayer, we're not perfect as Christians, we're just forgiven. And probably the key factor that in your sermon yesterday, Pastor, was salvation is free, but it's not cheap.
Mm-hmm. Words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, yes.
Quite the price paid for that.
Right.
And so I just wanted to elaborate, and how do we as Christian people in the churches reach out? And, I just got to say it, the gay community, there's so much in the news right now. And I think what you said there yesterday hit home with a lot of folks. And just because we vote Republican doesn't mean we're voting Christian in that video.
Right. Well, exactly. I think one of the things I referred to was many times we tend to prioritize sin. And the scriptures, we don't see Jesus prioritizing sin. He just basically calls us to follow the love commandment. And basically, if we're not doing that, then we're falling short. Mm-hmm. And, I said that the sins that I tend to be so critical of often are ones that I don't personally struggle with, or as much maybe as the next person may. And we have a tendency of trying to, it's part of our human history is, as far back to the fall where we allow pride to get in the way, and we want to become like God and make our own decisions, and it gets us in trouble every time. And
So where do we, as churches, where are we failing? Where are we not meeting the needs? I think church attendance is off 30 to 40% over the last 40 years. What's caused the lack of interest? Are we still doing things the way we used to, or not meeting the needs? What's the answer?
I think part of it is, we tend to like things to stay the same. And so certainly there are those situations where churches are unwilling to change. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think we sometimes place a lot of blame on the churches, and it's not just the churches. I mean, I think you look back, the values that this country was built on, the role of the family alongside the faith, and we had, you look at, our church went through a campaign last year where we now have our staff in place, but for the young families and the senior adult. But, one of the things that we were talking about a couple of years ago was the Deuteronomy 6:4 and the Shema is that text, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul. And the emphasis for the parents to be teaching their children God's word. And Dale, somewhere along the way, it's like society just kind of punted their kids to the church, and the church was glad to receive. And obviously, we want to make a difference in the lives of children, in the lives of families. But your school teachers, your churches, these other organizations are not substitutes for what the family can do, what the parent or primary caregiver can do for that child in the home. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of failure, a lot of...
Have you even noticed some of the television commercials, Ted? They'll show a mom serving a meal without the dad present, or dad will be there without the mom. Very seldom do you see television commercials that include a family unit. In fact, there's a movement, I think it was based in D.C., where they said, hey, fathers are part of the family too. We want to see, mom can be setting the table while dad's putting the soup in the bowl or putting the mustard on the sandwich or whatever it may be, or packing the school lunch. And now you're starting to see just a little bit more. You notice some of the television commercials were segregated, where there may be a white man that was the neighbor to an African American. They're playing basketball, and I remember one where they played one-on-one for a Bud Light. It was a Bud Light commercial, but it showed that they were together.
Right.
There wasn't any animosity between them because they were neighbors in the same neighborhood.
Right. And I think for the real hope in our country is going to come from people turning towards the Lord. I mean, it's not going to be our government. It's not going to be anything apart from God's intervention. Is what I really believe, and I think, you give the example with the family, and actually, probably some of that advertising is more correct than what we perceive, because today that traditional nuclear family is, that's the minority today. And one of the things I think that when you say, how does the church reach out, if all people are hearing from us is this is the idea of family,
Yeah.
and you've got that
Yeah.
single mom out there or the single dad. I mean, you look at the percentage of our people who are not in that model. What message are they hearing from us? It may be kind of like those scribes and Pharisees.
So is this where we need to change in the church to welcome?
I think to welcome, again, I think we sometimes want to apologize for God's standard. God is the one who gives us His word and shows us what His intentions are for us. And I think we continue to lift that up, but we can't be judging of those who aren't following it perfectly every day, because none of us are. I mean, only Jesus was able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we want to see ourselves as Jesus, and we just need to focus on Jesus being in us.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're just forgiven. We're not perfect.
Yes.
But just
Yes.
because I say I'm a Christian, I've been saved, doesn't give me, like Alan said right here, to point my finger at him and say, you did this wrong,
No, it does
that
not.
don't give me that privilege. And I think that's why people outside the church think that we're trying to, and maybe they're
Well, there are some, I mean, there are very judgmental, narrow-minded, legalistic Christians, but I don't think that is the majority. I really don't. I think most Christians are just trying to stay focused upon God and follow His leading, and most Christians, I would hope, don't have to be reminded of that
but then sometimes
log in our eye.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I've even thought, well, I've got me to worry about. I don't really need to care about anybody else, and that's wrong too.
Well, we talked about that last night in a community group at the church, and we were looking at a little book by Tom Rainer, Autopsy of a Deceased Church, 12 Things You Can Do to Keep Yours Alive. And we were talking about churches that are more inwardly focused than outwardly focused, and how you can just look, kind of like with a person, you look at their pocketbook, tell a lot about them. Same with the church. Are we giving outwardly? Are we giving out into the community? And that shows a lot about what we think is really important. And so I think it's essential. And one of the things that I shared with the church, or with the group that I was in, is that I don't think you can really be on your way to being a truly healthy church until you are looking outside of yourself, and until you begin focusing on those needs of others. And as we begin to focus on the needs of others, it's not a self-improvement program, but we just begin to heal, because I believe God wired us that way, to look beyond ourselves and to really see the needs of others and to do what we can to address them.
Bring up one thing that I'm guilty of here that some people don't understand is during our basketball program, during the breaks between, I've played just basic rock and country music. Anywhere from the Rolling Stones to Patsy Cline to who knows what's in the computer. And I've actually had people say, why are you doing that in the church? I said,
Sure.
Why not?
Sure.
I said, if I were to hit everybody with Christian music constantly, which I have, I've mixed in a little Casting Crowns and some
Right.
Mercy Me and stuff like that, but we're all on the same page. I think you've enjoyed it as much as anybody, as the pastor of the church.
Oh, I do. But I guess I would disagree with you in that we're all on the same page. Well, you're talking about we're all on the same page when we're there.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe not everybody is. And I think that some of that goes back to our orientation to what the church is, and you've got different schools of thought where some people everything. I mean it's, and I think again there's a healthy image there that people have of the church. I mean, that this is God's house, and this building is. I mean, we built this to come together for God, and we want to be reverent. We want to be respectful. We want to be holy. I knew an old guy in my first church. I remember a kid walked in on Wednesday night, and little boy had a cap on his head. Mr. Dick had come down from New York on a football scholarship, Ouachita, big man, and he is a World War II vet. He saw that boy with that cap on his head, and, get that hat off your head, boy. That's not respectful. Well, I appreciated what he was doing, but I also realized that kid's clueless that he's been irreverent. What kind of message is he hearing now? Yep. And so I think that's it.
He didn't feel welcome.
He didn't feel welcome. Yep. And you're wanting the people that come in that building to feel welcome. And if it's a Beatles song, hey, that's something they can identify with. Mm-hmm. But I think it is seeing those opposite approaches kind of come together and reconcile them. How can we more?
You know how long it takes to check the lyrics?
Oh, I'm sure. I can't imagine. Yeah.
Final thoughts real quick before you go to break, Pastor. Just salvation is free, but it's not cheap.
Yes. I think we live our lives, probably go for hours, maybe days, sometimes weeks, some people years, some a lifetime, not thinking about what Jesus actually endured for us to have this freedom under his lordship. And my prayer is that we would just begin to really think about, particularly for this time of year as we're approaching Easter, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ and what that meant. And you think about someone close to you that has made a tremendous sacrifice. What does that evoke from you? How do you feel led to respond to that? Jesus, the sacrifice of Jesus was for every single person who would come to him in faith and be reconciled by the blood he shed on the cross.
Visiting with Tad Rogers. Time for the news. Be right back. 7:35 on a beautiful Monday morning. Well, how about this weather and this weather?
Oh man, first short sleeve day I've had. Dale. I'm enjoying it.
It's nice.
It is.
So, what did you think about Kentucky and Arkansas yesterday?
I wasn't surprised. I don't know how anyone is going to beat Kentucky. I mean, if that group stays healthy, I think they're probably going to go all the way. No one is even coming close to them. They're pretty phenomenal. I mean, they're just incredible to watch. 34
wins, I think, now straight.
Yeah, undefeated, and and Arkansas's got that's a pretty decent team. Club. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think Portis he did okay. He wasn't outstanding, but he did okay.
Yeah, he I like the 3-pointer, or I think it was a 3 early on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At least we tied him at 19, but after that it was all over.
Rough. Hard afternoon. I went out on the lake and looked at the Eagles after that.
I rode out. Let's see, where'd I go? Went out to Cranfield. Of course, they've got the gates closed. Couldn't see much, but it's pretty. I'm ready for warm weather.
Oh man!
I even got on the tractor yesterday afternoon, cleaned up the yard a little bit, and I'm ready.
Yeah, good. So. Me too.
Well, getting back to our discussion, making people feel welcome in the church. I mean, we've got such a diverse population in the Twin Lakes area. We've got folks from Chicago, New York, native Arkansans, people from California. There's all walks of life.
There are.
And meeting the needs,
know. And I think you probably, if you look at our churches, whether it be, any of the churches in town, you're probably seeing a pretty good reflection of the community. I know we do, and I think that's very healthy to see when you look out in the community and you see that reflection in your church. Do we want it to be more? Of course we do, but I think it's essential that we be targeting all the different age groups, people from different walks of life, and I see it's doing more of that, and I think that's going to be crucial, Dale. I really do.
Then again, I don't feel as old as my age reflects. I'll be 57 next month.
Mm-hmm.
But yet I'm still I'm still an old rock and roller. I like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s music, But yet there's people out there that have never seen the audio formats that I use.
Mm-hmm.
I now occasionally would go into the schools and give demonstrations on the history of recorded sound. And it's funny to watch these kids. I've got a 1929 Zenith radio.
Mm-hmm.
And it stands about as tall as it come to about the base of that windowsill right there. It's an AM radio. And then I've got a little pocket chip radio that picks up AM, FM stereo, plus it picks up broadcast around the world. It's got shortwave. One of the tubes in the back of that old radio is taller than the entire radio that was built in like 2004. There's, within
Right.
the 80 years difference. Plus the fact you'd be surprised how many kids have never seen a phonograph record. I demonstrated one time, I said, I'm holding up 12 songs right here, and I had 645 RPMs in my hand. Because like, what is that? They'd never seen this stuff. And then to take the computer and say, a friend of mine was there with the computer, he had 49,000 songs in his computer. Mm-hmm. Now for me to relate to somebody nowadays that is a computer genius, it's hard for me because I'm old school. I grew up with tape, records, and tubes in my audio equipment. Now we've got the computer generation. Like my boys can make, hey, Dad, watch this, click, click, and the coffee pot starts. That's where we're at nowadays. How do we, in my generation, relate to those that are in a totally new technological generation, so to speak? There's a different world out there for techies.
There is a different world, and I think, a lot of them are interested in what the history of the communication that you can bring to them. There's a lot we can learn from them. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about cross-generational ministries, and I think that's important. You're talking about here your technology, computers, social media, whatever the technology may be, but you think about gardening, just a variety of topics that young people want to,
Well, even auto mechanics.
mechanics.
Remember the days where, hey, I'm going to take that engine out of this car and put it over here and swap. I'm going to go to two,
now
4 barrel, blah, blah.
Right.
You can't do that anymore. Now the days of the shade
Right.
tree mechanic and the shade tree hot rodder.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you go back into my day and get like my 57 Chrysler, somebody's in a 57 Chevy.
Right.
You take the 327 out, put a 300 or 350 under the hood. And
that
was easy.
I think again, as it comes down to us looking beyond ourselves, and the guy that doesn't know a lot about the technology, he's got to quit getting so hung up on the fact that he doesn't know a lot about technology, and reach out the people who that's the only way they communicate. They need to get over the fact that there's other ways of communicating. With all of the, I'm looking around now and I'm seeing all the lights and everything going off and on, and we're so much more sophisticated at communication, and yet we're so just over stimulated by all of this media and all the things that come our way that we don't communicate very effectively. How often do we just sit down for a meal together?
Yeah.
Or I think it might have been yesterday, day before, a little article in the paper I saw. Do you remember when the television used to go off at 11 o'clock?
Yeah.
I think that kind of stuff, Dale, we were more programmed for what we're doing here today for a balanced life. Now it's 24/7 all the time. You've got I'm sitting here with this, where my
and you've
phone.
got more communication.
I've got more communication on this little phone than any other computer.
Think if we would have had that during the Kennedy assassination of 63. Did you know that videotape is now extinct that didn't exist on November 22nd, 1963? That was old film.
Yeah.
I've got old reels of newsreels of Dan Rather saying, portable tape equipment didn't exist. Cameras that I've thrown away
Right.
don't exist.
Right.
Or didn't exist in those days.
Yeah.
I talked with a General Motors engineer one day, and he said there are more, this is back in 1999, more computer functions on the basic Chevrolet car of 1999 than what it took to put man on the moon in 69.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that's true.
And in 1969, the calculator didn't exist. Computers were still housed in rooms rather than on your desktop.
Right.
You know, there's been a lot of changes here. And
There are, but I think, again, as we look beyond ourselves, just like yesterday, some of us were in the meeting, some folks going to Nicaragua this summer.
Yeah.
I mean, when you get over there and you get around where the majority of the people in this world, how they are really living.
Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And it's unbelievable how the most advanced people here with all of the technology and so forth, I mean, there'll be a lot more similarities when we get over there just on the basics of life and how
My son went to Haiti 1 or 2 years after the massive earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
And they told him, and of course he's in Fayetteville and he raised his own money, and they said, okay, here's the thing. Once you get on that airplane at Fayetteville, Arkansas, that's the last shower you're going to take until you land back in Fayetteville 10 days later, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked him up at the airport, and I think the plane landed at 11:45 one evening. It flew in out of Miami, Dallas, back to Fayetteville. And I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to go take a shower. You know.
Yeah.
And I admire his dedication for being able to do that. And it's good to see somebody of that generation wanting to do something like that. But then when we go back to the technology in our families, and you said, remember when the TV used to go off at 11 o'clock? Well, I remember when Mom said, you've watched enough TV, go outside and play. Or that's enough, do this, do that. You know, got your homework done. We used to program the TV, but now because of remote control, it controls us.
It does.
And there's a time where the off button sometimes is the best channel.
Oh, I agree. And
the indoctrination thereof, I get tired of hearing the news. I get tired of just turn it off and do something else.
And there's nothing to prevent us from doing that, but ourselves.
Yeah.
Just to tune out, take a walk, or just have a time of devotional.
Yeah.
Just prayer, seeing what God's Word has to say about how we live versus what the most outgoing personality tells us.
I put on Facebook during the snowstorm, I said, we've walked on the moon. Technology has come so far in the 7:52 on a beautiful Monday morning. We're continuing our discussion with Tad Rogers, pastor, First Baptist Church. And what's on your mind for the last part, Pastor?
Well, I was just thinking about what a beautiful day it is. As you mentioned earlier, it's gorgeous out there. Looking forward to experiencing some of it. Well, we were talking during the break. Our family has been here now a little over 2 years, Dale, and we are loving it in the community and pastoring over at First Baptist Church. And I really do. I'm just excited about what God is doing here. And I would just encourage folks, whether you have been a part of our church over the years. If you're in another church, hey, that is wonderful. There are some great churches in this community, and I was in a meeting last year, and we were looking at some of the statistics, and said if every church in the area doubled next year, it still wouldn't make a dent in the population, really. So there's so much work to be done for all of our churches, and my encouragement would be to anyone to just pray about where God would have you to be and plug into that local church. And serving as a pastor at First Baptist, obviously, I mean, we have a new staff. It's an exciting time in the life of our church. We'd love to see folks consider us, but again, the main thing is, I think, just to pray about where God would have me, and know that if we're on your mind, you come to us, you're going to be loved and welcomed at First Baptist Church.
No matter what.
No matter what. I mean, and I think, some of the things we were talking about earlier related to, why so many folks aren't in church nowadays. And so you talk to so many people who've been hurt in church, who've been disconnected from some reason. Maybe a Christian let them down, and one of the things that I preach and really want people to be aware of is that we can't look to anyone other than Jesus Christ. You'll let me down someday, Dale. I'll let you down. We're human,
We're human
beings, and when we place upon one another what only God can do, we're setting ourselves and others up for failure. So I just encourage people to be in a church where Christ is lifted up, and we're going forward in our faith and our walk with Him.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have something different coming up on Down on the Corner. Hopefully, where's my calendar? Somewhere around the week of the 30th of March, perhaps, working with the Mountain Home Christian Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the children there will be doing the morning prayer.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's going to be fun. That's going
That
to be
will
something
be fun.
different.
I think
a
that's
little bit of a change.
important, and get these children involved early on. They are so much a part of our community, and we talk about children are the future, but they're now as well.
Yeah.
And how we are investing in them now says a lot
And
about.
take the time to listen to a child.
Yes, oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
And so perceptive.
Yes.
And again, you were asking, why so many people aren't, tapping into the churches, and I think because a lot of times people sense that maybe we're not as real, and I love a child can sense it quickly if we're real.
Man,
They know if this is genuine. They may not know what authenticity means, but they know if they're seeing it or not.
That is
And
true.
they want what's real.
I appreciate you coming in on short notice.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
Schedule
You and Al
changes
have a
last
great
minute. And I had
day.
to, hey, what are you doing tomorrow at 7 o'clock?
Yeah,
I'll buy
man,
breakfast.
enjoyed it. Great start to a
You
week.
bet.
Hope
I
everyone has a
appreciate
blessed week. Yes, sir.
Clark Ridge Volunteer Fire Department is holding a fish fry on March 28th from 4:30 to 6:30. Another good opportunity to support our local volunteer fire departments. They've got 17 or 18 in the county, or in the two-county area. And I tell you what, we need some volunteers for these departments. Call your local fire department chief. How can I help?
Absolutely. Another great way of making a difference in the community.
Yeah. So anyway, well, let's see. That is going to be $8 for adults, $4 for children under 12. Takes place on March 28th. Once again, this Saturday on Straight from the Horse's Mouth. Congressman Rick Crawford will be our guest, of course, by telephone. And look forward to bringing that broadcast to you. That wraps it up. We'll be back tomorrow. Right now, it's the Rush Morning Update, followed by Glenn Beck. We'll see you tomorrow.